She's talking to us from Switzerland. She's a member of the scientific committee and project manager for Geothermie-Suisse. She's a doctor in structural geology by the University of Friburgo in Germany, and has a master's in hydrogeology and hydrothermics from the University.
Speech is entitled The Development of Geothermal in Switzerland. Nicole, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Aitor Wogart. This is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the very kind introduction of my my background studies. I am talking from Switzerland, as it said before. I hope you can hear me properly, and if everything is, and you can see my presentation. Okay, good. So I'm going to talk about the geothermal energy and underground urban energies in a new urban development in Switzerland. As Mr. Ugarte has presented me, so I'm briefly just informing and giving my contacts. If you wish to make a contact after this presentation, I'm available to answer any questions and to discuss through email or by telephone, whatever you wish. This presentation is organized, so by the first part, I'm going to talk about our association, Geothermie-Suisse, and our role in Switzerland. I'm going to pass through some energy statistics, afterwards the different types of geoenergies, followed by the geothermal projects in Switzerland, the regulatory organisms and the legislation in Switzerland. To conclude my presentation with the Horizons 2050 and the objectives and how Switzerland is planning to achieve those objectives for 2050. And afterwards, of course, there will be the block of questions by the end of the presentation from Mr. Daniel Munoz. Geothermie-Suisse is an association. It is compiled by scientific members, and also regulatory members, and also people that work from different kind of office and work on the geothermal energy and all drilling or exploiting the energy or making installation in urban areas. Our objective is really to replace the fossil fuels and reduce the CO2 emissions, and also to produce electricity from geothermal systems. We are not yet at this stage in Switzerland, but we also, in this association, we are also in charge of conferences and specialized courses to inform people and to specialize them in different areas of geothermal energy. So now we're going to discuss a little bit of different statistics that are from the energy consumption in Switzerland. And this graph shows from the beginning of 1910 to 2015 how the energy and the boom from the increase and the industrialized processes that happened in the country, and how the energies were used for this new urban and the energy resources that were exploited differently to support the evolution of the business in the country. We observe in the top of the graph in the upper area that this is the amount of green energy that is in fact used in the past 10-15 years, that we start to develop more green energy to support our especially heating systems and to decrease the CO2 consumption. In the pie graph here, I present how the source of energy in heat consumptions are used nowadays at this precise year, and from the last year to in 2019. And we observe that the most part is from wood extraction energy and then electricity in orange. And the others renewable energy are in fact 3.6% that of the resources and the heat consumption in Switzerland comes from renewable energy. From this 3.6%, I will show in the next table how the green energy are divided and in percentage, how this is in megawatt hour per year, how the consumption is distributed in the country. So most of the renewable energy, 80%, equivalent of 80% of this renewable energy, comes from geothermal probes and earth registers. This is a system that I'm going to explain further in my presentation. I'm going to explain each one of those technicalities to exploit the geothermal energy in this country. Also, we use groundwater, which corresponds to 10%. We use thermal water, which means that it's a warm water that is close to the surface and is exploited to heating, distribution of heating. The geostructures that are a little more complex and comprehend 1.5%. And our main goal of this period at this precise moment is to exploit and develop better the deep aquifers for direct use, whether for heating or maybe to produce electricity. And we also have drainage from water from tunnels that are used directly. And I will show the example of one big project in Switzerland, which corresponds to 0.3%. And the deep geothermal probes, which are like the geothermal probes, but the geothermal probes, they're shallow, which means that they comprehend a depth of 500 meters. And the deep geothermal probes corresponds to the same structure, but they go deeper and close to 1,000 meters in depth. How this energy evolved in the past 50 years. So in blue, I'm showing this graph is in German, but in blue, it corresponds to the geothermal probes. In red, the thermal baths, which are also considered as energy and direct energy use. In orange is the near surface groundwater, which means it's the aquifers close to the surface and they are directly exploited. And in yellow are different other systems that can be Corbeil, Geothermique, and there are other small ways of exploiting the ground water energy and to use the energy directly or indirectly to produce or heat in heating in different systems. Here, this diagram shows all the different kinds of source of techniques and technical engineers that can be used to exploit the heat in the underground and to transport the energy to the surface, to the urban areas. So we have in the first, in yellow, it corresponds to the shallow or low enthalpy of energy, which is mostly to small houses and small buildings, which exploit directly the heat from the ground through geothermal probes, or the shallow aquifers, which corresponds to the number 1 and number 2 in this diagram. And number 3 is the shallow probes that corresponds. And the number 4 and number 5 corresponds to the geostructures and the probes network. What does that mean? That means that you have not only one borehole that exploit, but because the demand of energy of a building is much higher, so we need to install a large amount of probes to be able to sustain the demand, the energetic demand of a building through the energy of the underground. Of course, the energy of the underground cannot be exploited directly. We always need a source of a fluid that needs to transport this energy from the areas that are warmer, that are in a higher temperature, to the buildings on the upper, in the urban areas. Afterwards, there is the thermal water, which is used most for thermal bath and heating swimming pools and spa areas and hotels in the country, which is a large part of the industries that use this energy. And we have also deep boreholes that goes close to 1,200 meters depth. And we have the high enthalpy projects, that the ones that exploit directly use of the aquifers that have a higher temperature, or that is the main objective at this point in the country, to try to use the petrothermal, which is the rocks that are hot, and we use 2 boreholes to produce and inject fluids and have a temperature that is suitable to produce electricity from geothermal energy. How those vertical heat probes work? So we classify them as a closed system, and it's a sort of a combination of pipes that are installed in the underground, and you have fluids that circulate. So the cold fluid descends on the underground, it gets warm, and then it transports the energy to a heat pump to be distributed in a interior of a house or a building. And often this fluid is a fluid that should avoid freezing. So the temperatures of this fluid, it's a mixture with salt. So the temperature to freeze is below -10 degrees. And this is very important because once this fluid get froze or get freeze, the structure is completely unused. And the fluid circulates in a loop, which means that it's in the same loop. The fluid goes down, warms, and transports the energy to a heat pump that is installed in the house. As we discussed previously, when the demand of energy in these buildings are higher, so it is necessary to install a field probe, which corresponds to an amount of probes that is superior to 5. And they have a special regulation that we're going to discuss a little later in the presentation. And these similar systems are installed also as energy geostructures and are already associated and in the foundations of building, which is engineering projects, it's engineering calculations that have to be done before the construction of the building. We pass through and we discuss now the open system. What are the open system? Are the direct use of the fluid that is present in the aquifer, which means that there is no other fluid. We just exploit water. The water in the aquifers are in a higher temperature, for example, close to 10 degrees, and we can exploit this energy to pass through a heat pump, and then we inject the fluid back to the aquifer. Of course, the difference of temperature cannot exceed 3 degrees, and those installations are close to the surface and have you have to characterize the aquifer in porosity, the hydraulic conductivity, the mineral and the particles, because this is important to maintain the health of the heat pump that is transporting, which is our exchanging the energy between the source and the building. Here I have another diagram that shows the different closed system and open system that I discussed before, and the placement of this heat pump. And the heat pump are tools that are used to transport and to generate and to transform the energy that comes from the underground, to dissipate this energy inside buildings and to distribute for heating or cooling. How does these heat pumps work? Often you have 3 different kinds. You can use the air, you can use the ground energy, and you can also use the water from aquifers as a source of energy. So you have in the left side of the heat pump, you have the green source, the renewable energy source, and then this exchange energy with the fluid that circulate inside the heat pump, which in turns exchange this energy to the fluid that is going to be used in the interior of the buildings or houses or in the urban area. These heat pumps are classified by their coefficient of performance, which means that a heat pump that has a 3 as a coefficient of performance. It means that it uses 1/3 as in electricity to work, to function, for the functioning of the machinery and the circulation of fluids. And the 2/3 of the energy used in this heat pump comes from this renewable source, which can be air, which can be the ground, and also the aquifers, the water from the aquifers. Another solution that Switzerland found for very densely urban areas that it's very difficult to install a borehole or to install a different source of energy to support these buildings and these densely urban areas. They are using the energy that comes from industries. It can be the cement factories, tunnels, incineration industries, or even sewage treatment areas, to use the relais, the extra energy that comes from, and they have to cool down these areas. So they use this energy to be transported to different buildings and be used as a heating, as a green heating source for buildings and for these densely urban areas in Switzerland. Now I'm going to pass concretely in what are the geothermal projects in Switzerland and how they are evolving. So this is our map from 2019. In green are the projects that received already the authorization to have to be exploited. In yellow are the planned projects that are just waiting for authorization. And in red are the projects that were abandoned. I'm showing here on the right side of the slide a diagram from the borehole of Lully, it's a new borehole from 2019 in Geneva, which is drilled at 1,200 meters. And on the head of the borehole, which we call in the top of the borehole, the temperatures measured are in order of 40 to 50 degrees. It's not yet used, it's not installed, it's not, it's just in the phase of finishing the borehole to be starting the installation of the system that is going to exploit this energy. Another and a different project that I'm going to show is a project that is found in Lucerne, which is between Zurich and Bern. And it's the Treppenhaus. Treppenhaus is direct use for geothermal energy, that it is used to maintain a greenhouse and produce exotic fruits, sturgeon meat, and caviar. And it is this idea to use geothermal energy not only for heating, but also to support and to produce different products and use the local economy. And the energy that comes from the Leuchberg tunnel, and it used the water, the hot water that is flowing in the tunnel, exchanging the energy, and this hot energy is used to maintain the temperatures of the swimming pools and produce exotic fruits and the caviar that is shown in the figures. I will discuss now the regulatory organisms in Switzerland and the legislation and regulatory and regulations that are how this is structured, how this energy is structured in Switzerland. And in here, I show all this energy is regulated by the Swiss Society of Engineers and Architects. It's a SIA. So they develop the instruments to give the indicators how this energy should be conceived and built, and how the calculations and the dimensioning of the project should be done. Also, they give courses, and they are also responsible for the legislation and the respect of the rules and the regulations that are proposed by this association. Geothermal energy projects, for private buildings, we need to make a calculation for 50 years of energy. So it needs to be proved that it's possible to exploit the energy, and the energy is available for 50 years of maintaining the new private buildings. And for public buildings, we need to prove that we can use the energy, that our calculations are well done for 100 years. In the federal level, the Confederation sets the objectives of the energy and how it should be done, and it also proposed subvention programs and for the cantons and the municipalities, and they have to organize themselves in order to give the documentation and approval of the projects. It's also interesting to discuss that in the cantons, the building authorizations are independently from each canton. They have their regulatory authorities, and they have their also their organisms to control and to give the authorization of new buildings and control this urban or urbanization area. How does this have been working? They have developed a territorial energetical plan, which defines the areas that new buildings can be constructed and the energy source which they can use. Now, in the past 2 years, different cities have already forbidden the use in new buildings or renovation projects, the use of fossil fuels as a source of energy. So the new buildings and the new installation or renewal projects, renovation projects must use renewable energy source to maintain the heating. And in those buildings, who is the owner of the energy? So in fact, the energy belongs and the installation belongs to the building. If family number one is the one that made the renovation projects, and they had to ask for local, communal, and cantonal authorization for the renovation, for this renovation project, they have received the subventions from the canton or the communes or even the confederation, depends on the size of their project, which corresponds to a maximum of 10% of the installation costs. And this installation and the entire documentation from this building belongs to the building and to the house. So if family number two comes and buy the house for a period after that the family number one leaves, all the entire documentation and regulation needs to be available in the house, in the buildings, for the next owner, that he has to have an idea what kind of projects have been done in these buildings and how the energy is has been used. So that's the main point and the main idea. As a total costs over the years, so renewable projects, which are illustrated in orange, is mainly the geothermal energy projects. They have a larger investment of départ, of a beginning. In the year zero, the investment is higher to have a geothermal energy project than if you use gas or oil or different fossil fuel energy. But it is observed within the past 20 years with the statistics that in fact the cost of the maintain of those structures are in fact lower and are decreased over time. And by 40 years, in fact, these renewable projects, they have a better finance investment than the fossil fuel projects. To wrap up everything that I have been discussing about the urban areas, so all underground energy resources are regulated in the same way, they belong to the same legislation and regulation, and there are special organisms that are responsible to maintain those projects and to the subvention, and depend on the size of those projects, the institutions involved, different permissions and subventions can be acquired in the different levels of the administration of the country. I I am reaching the end of my presentation with the Horizon 2050 for Switzerland and what are their objectives. So by 2030, they are decreasing the CO2 levels to those levels measured in 1990. The objective is to decrease and force a reduction in the CO2 emissions between 70 to 85% by 2050. To achieve that, they target a new law in CO2 that will come to action next year in 2021, which increases the tax on CO2 emissions for industry, buildings, and travels. And this is the way that the country found to make an overall consideration of the CO2 emissions to decrease those emissions and this tax money is in fact invested in new projects in renewable energy. And the idea, the ambitious target is to produce zero CO2 emissions by 2050, and thus meeting the internationally agreed target of limiting the global warming in 1.5 degrees, as it was in the pre-industrial era. I would like to thank you for your attention, and I will answer questions after the presentation of Mr. Daniel Muñoz. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Nicole.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Please don't go far because we're going to move on to the next speaker. We're going to ask you some questions. In fact, our manager, our director actually has some questions for you. Hello there, Nicole. Good morning. Firstly, thank you very much. Thank you very much for being with us. Since, you know, I represent Madrid Doctora, we like to go beyond the actual geothermal projects, and we like to make the most of any underground energy source, mostly urban. In that sense, I would like to know if there is any, for example, if I wanted to make the use of the subway network of Zurich, for example, to make use of the heat that it comes from the metro, from the subway, would that request be assessed differently to any other geothermal project? Would that entail requesting different permits, different authorizations?
If I understood properly with the translation, so you would like to know if you exploit the tunnel energy and how it would be as authorization. So in fact, the authorization, it has to be, if it's a large project and it's a large investment, so the confederation would be involved to in this kind of project, which means that in a federal level for authorization, it has to be done. Then you have to ask an authorization from the canton. Afterwards, you have to ask an authorization from the city, because in Switzerland, the areas belong to the county and to the cantons and to the commune, to the city, to the village. So all this, and it's like a pyramid, all these structures need to be involved to ask the authorization. And you have to have a clear plan how you're going to exploit this energy and how you're going to, and who is going to benefit. And most of the time you can come with this kind of project, and then you can ask for a subvention, and often is from the Office Fédéral, the Federal Office of Energy, that is going to be there following the project from the steps to give the permission, and also to propose a certain amount of money to invest, because they're going to count what is the urban area that is going to benefit from this project. So that's how it's going to be done for a tunnel for the energy that is used, as the same example that is used in the Tropenhaus, that is the Lötschberg tunnel, and is the energy from the Lötschberg tunnel that is used in this greenhouse to produce a certain products. And it's also a conference building, and it's also, this has this economic, you can go visit, you can make conference, you can make a different social events in this building. So it's a public building, and often there is the participation of private sector and the public sector in this type of projects.
Nicole, we have questions from other participants. We have a question from Jose Sánchez Guzmán, and it's related to what you have explained. But if you want to be a little bit more specific, where can we look up, where in the details of the legislation and the regulation in Switzerland, where can we look it up on a website, specifically the details?
Okay, you can go to the Federal Office of Energy. They have, they call ordonnance. This is how the country works. They give ordonnance, they have the federal law, but in the federal law, there are complements that are called ordonnance, and there is an ordonnance of the geology, there is an ordonnance for the aquifers exploitation, and there is an ordonnance for the energy. So you can find there are 3 different kinds of ordonnance. They are all available in the Federal Office of Energy in Switzerland, and there is a part that is in English. I am not sure that the ordonnance will be in English. Probably it's in French, and or German or Italian. They always publish their documentation in the 3 official language of the country. So it will need to be translated, but there is the place to go if you would like to inform yourself about the Swiss legislation and regulation in the upper level. Then you have the cantonal level. So you have a federal, a cantonal office of energy, and they have their own regulations, and things that you might be allowed to do in Zurich, you are not allowed to do in Lucerne or Bern or Valais, because there are a different way of them dealing with the energy. For example, in Valais, the exploitation of groundwater is to the property that it's on top of the area, and you don't need to ask federal permission, but you have to ask a communal permission, because there is a different historical level from each one of those cantons. So they have a different way of looking their resources, and they have their freedom of deciding.
Well, I saw the picture of the next speaker. If you allow me, Daniel, let's continue with another question. Nicole?
Yes, I'm here.
Another question. And if we can see Nicole's picture, please. I'm asking. So are we getting questions through the chat? So a reminder for the participants, it would be good to ask questions through the Q&A icon. They have 2 questions on the chat. I'm going to convey them to Nicole, but please, I would like to insist on the fact of using the Q&A icon. So one of the questions for Nicole, and I'm going to be translating it from English. What's the main regulatory body in Switzerland to present proposals for drilling high enthalpy wells? Are there any future plans to develop high enthalpy or EGS projects in Switzerland?
So everybody is aware of the 2 main trials that we did in Basel and St. Gallen. Those were high enthalpy drilling projects. One, we touched a fault which caused the earthquake, and then the project needed to be finished. And the other one, in fact, we found gas, and we needed to stop the project because drilling for water, the technical for drilling is different than for hydrocarbons. So you need, for hydrocarbons, the pressure is much higher. So you need to have a special drilling technique. All these two projects, they asked permission. You have to follow the same pyramid. You have to ask permission for the Federal Office of Energy. Probably depending on the location, you need to ask permission for the Federal Office of Environment, because they need to agree with the project as well. And you need to ask permission in the canton, if the canton is also on board to do this kind of project. And afterwards, you need to have a communal, you need to have a terrain. So you need to buy the area that you are planning to install the borehole, and you need to have the specific permissions for that. So that is where we find ourselves today. Yes, we are still working on drilling, but at this point, Switzerland decided to take a step back, and we are drilling little by little in different fault structure. And fault, why we drill in faults, because the permeability and the aquifer conditions in fractured aquifers are better to fluid to circulate and be exploited. So that's the point. That's the main point why we have to drill in areas with faults. And yes, so we have been drilling. Geneva is on top of the country right now with 2 new boreholes, and those boreholes are in depth of 1,200 and 1,400 meters. And they were a success. They could be drilled. They were drilling for 2 months, those boreholes, because they needed to go little by little to analyze the geology and the stability of the borehole. And in fact, it was the government, so OFEN was involved, the canton of Geneva was involved, and the industrial service of Geneva was really dealing with the studies and the analysis, the technical and geological analysis for this borehole. So that's how Switzerland is now taking the geothermal energy for deep projects in their hands, and they are really following up all the different stages of the projects. And there are some new projects that received the authorization in the canton of Jura, and it's Jura, close to the Jura Mountains, and it's Haute-Saône, and it received the authorization, and it's going to be drilled soon, probably next year or in 2 years. They have all the authorization, and they did, and this is a special voting, because in fact they included the population to vote if the population are okay with this kind of project, and they are aware of the difficulties that we might face with this kind of depth that we're going to exploit and the fault zones. So they realized that it was a little mistake to not include the population in the Basel project. So there were some repercussions. In the St. Gallen project, they have already made a referendum, and they asked the population to be included in the decision of investing the public money to this kind of project, and also to have their agreement, if they agree to have this. And most of Swiss people, they are really motivated to exploit and to have to give an opportunity of this energy. And we know that in Switzerland we have a great potential, and we will probably very soon have a very successful project to produce electricity with geothermal energy.
Thank you very much. We have another question.
Okay.
Nicole, there are 136 participants. I would like to thank all the participants that are here with us, all the attendees. It's a great pleasure to have a Congress on such a specific thing of a clean, sustainable energy. So much people interest. The last question, and then we move on to the next speaker. Now, there are 3 more questions, but we will continue later on, or if not, we do it offline or privately. But it is from Luis de Pereda. He's well known. He was at the beginning with Madrid Subterra. And it's a question that in the different assemblies and committees, it's creating us doubts in our meetings, and we need to work on this from the theoretical and regulatory point of view. And the question is, could you explain about the ownership of energy and it seems that in Switzerland, it belongs to citizens, that ownership, and not, it doesn't belong to the infrastructure companies. So the question is about the energy ownership. Who owns the energy? Is it, apparently in Switzerland is the citizens and not the infrastructure companies.
Yeah, I understand the question, but it's a little a tricky question, because it is true that, for example, if you have solar panels in your house, you can sell the energy, and in fact, it is deduced from your energy consumption in your house. So you have solar panels, you produce, I don't know, 30 kilowatt-hour, and your consumption of that year was 60, so you pay only 30. Because in fact you sold the energy to the grid. But that's for solar energy. So when you have a thermal exploitation from the ground or from a different source of renewable energy in a higher temperature, it is going to belong to the house and to the person that lives in that house. This is in a small scale of a person, of a house, of an unity. In a group, in an urban area, for example, this new borehole that is used, it is in fact stimulated by those industries to promote and to participate in the energy sector, to make available for the individuals, and they receive some incentive. What kind of incentive? It can be in tax incentives, and it can be in a different way that they included the industrials to participate in this little community. For example, there is a cement company. They need to have an oven for 900 degrees, and they produce heat because they need to produce cement. And then they need a very hot oven to produce it. And this high energy, in fact, they use to warm water, and this water is distributed to a community, to a different people. So the people pay for a certain amount, but it's largely subventioned by the government, and it is also beneficial for the society. But it's very difficult that a private person is going to make a borehole of 1,200 meters just by himself. So it's always the idea in Switzerland, it's always to have everybody included to the project, then everybody wins. So that's the main culture of this country, is to in fact involve everybody, all parties, and then all parties benefit from this. There is not one major gain or one major benefit from one industry, and that's the idea. So that's why they make this different association, or the service, the industrial service of Geneva, which is responsible for the drilling of that project, but the entire city of Geneva is going to benefit from this project. So that's the idea. And yes, it's part of the individuals that are owner of the energy, and it is part of those that have the money to maintain the system. If it's clear. I would like also to say that if you don't hesitate to send me your question by email, I can answer. So my email it is in my presentation. And if you wish to talk to me later, don't hesitate to send me an email. And this is, I don't know if you can see before we finish my presentation. So here is my email if you wish to contact me.